Have you ever wondered why a man, who on the surface seems strong and in control, suddenly crumbles when faced with the raw, unfiltered presence of a woman who knows herself? Beneath his polished charm and his carefully constructed image lies something far less stable, a restless tension, a hunger that is never quite satisfied. Carl Jung spoke of it often. The shadow, that hidden realm where desire and fear intertwine, where the male ego hides its darkest cravings. And within that shadow, there are 7 haunting desires, forces that silently guide his choices, shape his attraction, and fuel both his passion and his downfall. The first of these desires is the longing for dominance. The male ego yearns to be seen as powerful, to command respect and authority. Yet this desire is haunted by insecurity, for dominance sought externally always reveals inner weakness. When a man chases control over others, it is often because he cannot command himself. To you, this is why he sometimes tries to cage what he loves, silencing your voice, dimming your light, as though your brilliance threatens his own. But in truth, what he fears is his inability to master his own impulses. The more he grasps, the more hollow he feels. The second desire is conquest, not simply of territory or wealth, but of the feminine soul itself. He is pulled toward the thrill of winning, of claiming what has not yet been his. This is why some men lose interest once the chase is over, why the fire that seemed eternal burns out after possession. For conquest feeds the ego, not the heart. But Jung reminds us, what is not integrated becomes destructive. His craving to conquer reflects a deeper need, to confront his own inner feminine, the anima, the mystery within himself he has long denied. And until he faces her, he will endlessly chase her in the faces of women, mistaking pursuit for connection. The third desire is admiration. He craves your gaze, your validation, your belief in his strength. And while a woman's encouragement can uplift a man to greatness, the ego twists this need into dependency. He becomes addicted to applause, like an actor who cannot survive without an audience. Notice how some men collapse when they are no longer praised, how they drift when the mirror of adoration disappears. To rely on admiration is to remain enslaved to the opinions of others. Marcus Aurelius warned of this fragility. It is not death that a man should fear, but never beginning to live. A man who feeds only on praise never truly lives, for he has not yet faced himself. The fourth desire is immortality, the refusal to be forgotten. Through legacy, achievement, or even seduction, he yearns to leave his mark on the world. Yet behind this hunger lurks a terror of insignificance. He wants to believe that his name will echo through eternity, but the silence of time swallows all. So he clings to status, to wealth, to fleeting symbols of permanence. The woman who sees through this illusion understands something vital, that immortality is not won by leaving marks on the world, but by transcending the fear of vanishing. True presence in each moment outlasts all monuments. The fifth desire is possession. He seeks to own, not just things but people. His ego whispers that love is safer when bound, that freedom is dangerous, that if he cannot own it, it may abandon him. And so, jealousy blooms. Possession masquerades as devotion, but in reality, it is fear wearing a mask. Seneca wrote, "He who fears death will never do anything worthy of a living man. Likewise, he who fears loss will never love freely." To the awakened woman, this is clear. Love is not meant to be a cage, but a sanctuary. The sixth desire is vengeance. The ego recoils at rejection, humiliation, or betrayal. To be wounded by love or pride awakens a darkness that whispers of payback. His anger disguises his vulnerability, his desire for retribution concealing his inability to grieve with dignity. Jung would say that vengeance is the shadow's attempt at restoration, but instead of healing, it perpetuates the wound. When you see a man consumed by resentment, know that he has not yet faced his shadow with courage. His rage is but a child crying out for recognition. And then the seventh desire, the most haunting of all, transcendence. Beneath the layers of ego, beneath dominance, conquest, admiration, possession, and even vengeance, lies a deeper yearning. He longs to escape the prison of his own limitations, to merge with something greater than himself. This is the sacred hunger that drives him to art, to battle, to love. Yet because he does not fully understand it, he often misdirects it. He seeks transcendence in fleeting pleasures, mistaking intoxication for enlightenment, mistaking lust for union. But in truth, this desire points toward something holy, the reunion of his fractured self with the soul he has long abandoned. These 7 desires do not exist outside of him. They are the shadows within, whispering to his ego, guiding his hands and haunting his nights. And when a woman understands them, she no longer fears his unpredictability, nor is she seduced blindly by his charm. She sees the truth, that every man is not only battling the world around him, but the ghostly hunger within him. The male ego, haunted by its 7 desires, moves through the world like a restless wanderer seeking shelter yet resisting stillness. What most men do not realize is that these desires are not flaws to be erased, but archetypal forces, calling them to confront their inner shadow. Jung wrote that what remains unconscious will control one's life and be called fate. The truth is that many men mistake their fate for destiny, never realizing they are trapped by the very longings they refuse to acknowledge. The desire for dominance, for example, often breeds both admiration and resentment. To some, he appears powerful, unshakable, a pillar of control. But to the woman who looks more deeply, his need for dominance reveals a brittle foundation. The louder he asserts his authority, the more fragile his inner sense of worth. And so he tests you. He pushes boundaries. He challenges your independence, as though silencing you will strengthen him. But it does not. In fact, the more he suppresses, the more he reveals his inability to face the chaos within. You, who are unbroken, threaten him not by defiance but by existing fully in your own essence. Conquest follows close behind, feeding on this fragility. A man who cannot conquer himself seeks instead to conquer others. Women often become trophies in this endless game, chased, captured, displayed, and discarded. Yet conquest never ends in peace. It ends in emptiness. Once the prize is won, the hunger reawakens, whispering that the victory was not enough. And so he begins again, repeating the cycle of pursuit without ever touching true intimacy. What he truly seeks, though he does not know it, is union with the feminine within, the anima that dwells in his unconscious, waiting for him to integrate her voice. Until then, conquest is a shadow play, an endless cycle of winning and losing, with no true victory. Admiration, the 3rd desire, can uplift or enslave him. A man praised too often without confronting his own weakness grows addicted to the sound of applause. He learns to perform rather than to live. To the world, he is charming. To himself, he is hollow. When a woman with insight withdraws her validation, he feels abandoned, not because she has wronged him, but because he never learned to stand without a mirror. Here lies the tragic irony. The stronger his thirst for admiration, the more fragile his spirit becomes. And the woman who refuses to endlessly feed his ego becomes, in his eyes, dangerous. For she exposes the truth he has long avoided.
Immortality, his 4th haunting, rises when he feels the limits of time. Men build monuments, chase status, write their names in stone, all in an attempt to resist vanishing. Yet immortality built on fear never lasts. Time erases what is not rooted in authenticity.
The woman who sees through his empire recognizes that his frantic building is less about glory, more about terror, the terror of being forgotten. And yet how often does he miss the simple truth that the only real immortality is presence? A moment of true love, a word spoken from the soul, outlives centuries of empty conquest. Possession is a darker desire, clothed in the costume of devotion. He wants to keep her, to hold her, to own her spirit as though love were an object of trade. But possession always kills what it tries to preserve. The freer the woman, the more he wishes to bind her, the more radiant she becomes, the more he seeks to dim her light. This is not because he loves too deeply, but because he fears too much. Love is not a chain. The woman who understands this refuses to be owned, for she knows that true union cannot bloom in captivity. Vengeance, the sixth shadow, erupts when his pride is wounded. Rejected, betrayed, or simply overlooked, he often mistakes pain for weakness and revenge for strength. Yet vengeance is not power. It is the echo of a wound he refuses to heal. His anger disguises his grief. His cruelty masks his sorrow. The woman who sees through this understands that behind his rage is not a monster, but a broken child still crying in the shadows. He is not evil. He is unhealed. And until he faces that pain, vengeance will consume him. And then comes transcendence, the final and most paradoxical desire. Beneath his hunger for control, conquest, admiration, legacy, possession, and revenge lies a sacred longing to escape the prison of his own ego. He seeks the eternal, the infinite, the divine. But too often he mistakes intoxication for transcendence, lust for union, power for enlightenment. The truth is, transcendence cannot be found in domination or conquest. It is found in surrender. To merge with something greater, he must first face the smallness of his ego. He must accept that the very thing he fears, vulnerability, humility, loss, is the key to the freedom he craves. The man who does not confront these desires becomes enslaved by them. He will cycle endlessly between hunger and dissatisfaction, between longing and emptiness. But the man who dares to face them, to meet his shadow without turning away, begins to transform. He learns that dominance is not control over others, but mastery of self. That conquest is not about winning women, but uniting with his inner feminine. That admiration is not applause, but the quiet dignity of living authentically. That immortality is not carved in monuments, but in the soul's presence. That possession is not love, but fear. That vengeance is not strength, but unhealed grief. And that transcendence is not escape, but integration. The woman who recognizes these truths is no longer blinded by his surface. She sees the deeper battle within him. She becomes not prey to his desires, but mirror to his soul. And in that mirror, the male ego must finally decide to remain haunted or to awaken. A man's ego is like a fortress, tall, guarded, built stone by stone through years of proving himself against the world. But a fortress is not the same as a home. It keeps out enemies, yes, but it also keeps out intimacy. The woman who stands before him, radiant and unafraid, is not deterred by the walls. She feels the loneliness that lingers within, the hollow echo of a self that fears collapse. What he calls strength is often only armor, forged to conceal the desires he dares not reveal. And it is here, in this tension between his armor and his shadow, that the real story begins. Dominance, when left unchecked, hardens into tyranny, not only over others, but over himself. He rules his own heart with an iron fist, denying softness, exiling tenderness, treating vulnerability as weakness. But the unconscious does not obey. What is suppressed returns. It returns as anxiety, as rage, as the gnawing suspicion that no matter how strong he appears, he remains fragile inside. You, who can sense the energy beneath words, recognize this truth. The man who insists most loudly on his power is often the most terrified of his powerlessness. His control over you is only an attempt to silence the rebellion within himself. The same restless force drives his desire for conquest. Outwardly, it looks like confidence, the charisma of the hunter who knows no fear. But look closer. Conquest is born of restlessness, the inability to sit with stillness. He cannot linger too long in love, because love requires depth, and depth terrifies him. So he keeps moving. One goal, one woman, one victory after another. Yet none of these fill him. Because what he chases is not you, not her, not the thrill of possession, but the anima within, the inner feminine he has never embraced. Until he stops running and turns inward, conquest will leave him hungry. Admiration becomes another trap. He believes applause will silence the doubt inside him, but applause only feeds it. Like water poured into a bottomless well, it disappears without ever quenching. The more he receives, the more he demands. And when silence falls, he feels abandoned, as though without your gaze, he does not exist. This is why some men crumble when you step back, why they grow angry when you withdraw your energy. They mistake your validation for oxygen, forgetting that the breath of life can only come from within. You who have learned the art of standing alone, understand this paradox. The man who needs constant admiration is already enslaved. Immortality, too, when twisted by ego, becomes a desperate theater. He builds, he achieves, he boasts, all in defiance of the truth that he too will fade. His terror of insignificance drives him to leave marks upon the world, yet those marks are carved in sand, washed away by time. He forgets that legacy is not about being remembered, but about being real. One act of truth, one moment of soul, has more weight than 1,000 empty achievements. But to see this, he must let go of the illusion that greatness is measured by permanence. The woman who sees clearly does not fall for his monuments. She listens instead for his authenticity. Possession is perhaps the most intimate of his desires, and the most destructive. His love feels like chains disguised as devotion, a hunger to keep, to control, to bind. He tells himself it is protection, but beneath it lies fear. Fear that without possession he will lose, and without control, he will vanish. Yet possession suffocates the very love he wants to preserve. The woman he binds becomes less radiant, less free, less alive, until she is no longer the woman he first desired. This is the cruel irony. In trying to keep her, he destroys what drew him to her. True love is freedom, and only the man who understands this can truly keep what he cherishes. Vengeance festers when pride is wounded. Rejection, betrayal, even indifference, the ego interprets all as an insult, a fracture to its fragile armor. And so, vengeance becomes his salve. He lashes out, not because he is strong, but because he cannot bear the wound. His cruelty is not strength, it is grief wearing a mask. The woman who sees through this knows better than to fear his rage. She understands that behind the storm is sorrow, and behind the cruelty is a wound he has never tended. To him, vengeance feels like restoration. In truth, it is self-destruction, and beyond it all lies transcendence. This desire is pure, but it is corrupted by the ego's blindness. He longs for something beyond himself, union, divinity, wholeness. But instead of turning inward, he turns outward, chasing highs that fade and pleasures that numb. He mistakes intensity for enlightenment, conquest for completion. Yet true transcendence demands the very thing he resists: surrender. To become whole, he must embrace vulnerability. To unite with the eternal, he must let go of the illusion of control. When you, as a woman, witness these desires without fear, you step into profound power. You are no longer entangled in his games, nor seduced by his illusions. You see his shadow, and in seeing, you are free. And your freedom becomes a mirror, one he cannot escape. For when a man is faced with a woman who cannot be conquered, cannot be possessed, cannot be silenced, he is forced to confront the only conquest that matters, the conquest of himself. There comes a point when the illusions of the male ego begin to collapse under their own weight. No conquest is enough, no admiration deep enough, no possession secure enough to quiet the hunger inside him. It is then that he begins to sense what Jung described so clearly. The shadow is not the enemy, but the forgotten half of the self. Until he dares to turn toward it, his desires will continue to haunt him like restless ghosts. But when he does, when he finally faces the darkened mirror, transformation becomes possible. The man who once sought dominance over others begins to understand that the only true authority is self-mastery. His power is no longer measured in how many obey him, but in how little he is ruled by his own impulses. The fortress he built to project strength becomes unnecessary, for strength is now within him. He does not shout, he does not demand. His presence alone commands respect. And to the woman who encounters him, he feels different. He does not need to make her small to feel large. He does not need to silence her to feel heard. He allows her fullness because he has embraced his own. The restless conqueror, who once chased endlessly after women, achievements, and fleeting victories begins to recognize the futility of his pursuit. Conquest loses its charm when its emptiness becomes undeniable. What once felt like triumph now tastes like ash. And so he turns inward, discovering that the true conquest is integration of the anima, the feminine wisdom within. For the first time, he does not seek to take, but to meet. He looks at the woman before him not as prize or possession, but as reflection. And in that recognition, intimacy begins. Admiration, once his drug, loses its power when he no longer depends on applause for identity. He does not crumble when others withdraw their gaze, because he no longer fears invisibility. He understands that value does not come from performance but from being. And paradoxically, it is when he no longer needs validation that his presence becomes magnetic. He inspires, not by demanding recognition, but by embodying authenticity. The woman who once felt drained by his neediness now feels nourished by his wholeness. The terror of insignificance which once drove him to scramble for immortality softens into acceptance. He realizes that death cannot be escaped, but it can be transcended. His focus shifts from carving his name into eternity to living so fully in the present that each moment becomes eternal. Legacy, he discovers, is not what is remembered but what is real. The love he gives, the truth he speaks, the presence he embodies, these outlive monuments. And so he stops performing for history and begins to live for truth. Possession, once disguised as love, dissolves when he realizes that freedom is the soil in which devotion flourishes. The man who once tried to cage the woman he feared to lose now learns to open his hands. He understands that love cannot be owned without being destroyed. And so he releases control, discovering that trust is far stronger than chains. The woman who once felt bound by his insecurity now feels chosen by his courage, for he has learned that true love is not about possession, but about presence. Vengeance, too, transforms when he finally faces the wound beneath it. The anger that once consumed him is revealed as sorrow unacknowledged, and in daring to grieve he is freed. He no longer lashes out to restore pride, for he no longer needs to protect an image of himself. His dignity comes not from revenge, but from resilience. He forgives, not because betrayal was insignificant, but because he refuses to let pain dictate his future. In this he discovers true strength, the strength to turn wounds into wisdom, and transcendence, the most sacred of his desires, finally finds its true form. No longer is it sought in intoxication, conquest, or illusion. It is found in integration. He realizes that transcendence is not about leaving the human behind, but about embracing it fully. To unite the shadow and the light, the anima and the animus, the strength and the softness. This is transcendence. It is not escape, but wholeness. For the woman, this shift is transformative as well. She no longer feels trapped in the role of mirror or savior. She does not need to endure his illusions, nor shrink to soothe his wounds. Instead, she meets him in equality. Two whole beings walking their paths not in captivity but in choice. And here lies the deepest truth. When a man confronts his shadow and integrates his desires, he no longer haunts himself, and he no longer haunts the women he loves. He becomes a partner, not a captor, a seeker, not a conqueror, a man, not an ego. And so, the cycle completes itself. From dominance to self-mastery, from conquest to connection, from admiration to inspiration, from immortality to presence, from possession to devotion, from vengeance to wisdom, from false transcendence to true wholeness. This is the journey of the male ego through its 7 haunting desires. And for the woman who sees clearly, who does not lose herself in his shadows, this truth becomes her liberation. She knows she does not need to fix him, nor fear him, nor chase him. She is free to choose, to walk away, to stay, to love, without being consumed. For his shadow is his to face, not hers to carry. And the more she honors this truth, the more radiant she becomes. Untouchable by illusion, unshaken by ego, unstoppable in her becoming. The woman who knows her worth doesn't chase. She chooses. End.